Faithful Shadows, a tale of healing and heroism. Broken Vessels. The October wind swept fallen leaves across the pavement outside Second Chance Animal Shelter. Colonel Michael Hartwell stood motionless before the entrance, his broad shoulders wrapped in a worn military jacket from 3 tours across Afghanistan and Iraq. His fingers absently traced the service medal in his pocket, a reminder he rarely carried. But Dr. Levine's gentle insistence at yesterday's VA counseling session had prompted him to bring it. Michael hadn't laughed when the therapist suggested visiting the shelter. He didn't laugh much anymore. The explosion in Kandahar had stolen his hearing in one ear and damaged his right knee. But worse, it had taken his capacity for joy. In the 3 years since his medical discharge, Michael had retreated to his grandfather's cabin on Lakeview Drive, existing rather than living. Inside the shelter, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as barking echoed down the narrow corridor. A young woman named Emma approached, clipboard in hand, but Michael shook his head at her offer of assistance. The kennels lined both sides in orderly rows. Dogs pressed against the gates as Michael passed. A chocolate lab with a graying muzzle, a terrier whose body vibrated with excitement, a howling beagle. Michael kept his hands in his pockets, his expression unchanged. He had almost reached the exit when the last kennel caught his attention. Unlike the others, this dog wasn't at the gate. In the back corner lay a German Shepherd, his coat dull and patchy. The animal's amber eyes remained fixed on the floor, seemingly uninterested in human attention. A slight tremor ran through his right hind leg, even at rest. Michael paused, something stirring in his chest, the first genuine emotion he'd felt in months that wasn't anger or grief. Recognition. When Michael approached the kennel, the German Shepherd's head lifted slowly, ears rising to attention, not with excitement, but with quiet assessment. Their eyes met, and Michael felt a jolt of recognition. The dog's gaze held the same haunted awareness he saw in his mirror each morning, the look of someone who had seen too much. The nameplate read, Albert, male German Shepherd, approximately 9 years, former search and rescue / security K9. Below this, not recommended for adoption due to age, injury, and behavioral concerns. As Michael crouched down, Albert rose with deliberate dignity. His movement revealed a pronounced limp, patches of missing fur, and a long scar down his right flank. Yet the shepherd carried himself with military precision, his posture reflecting years of discipline. Emma appeared, explaining that Albert rarely acknowledged visitors. His history included distinguished service in disaster response and classified security deployments overseas. During his final mission, Albert had sustained significant injuries while extracting a civilian from a collapsed structure. His handler had been killed in the same incident. The rehabilitation specialist had worked with Albert for months, but his combination of physical limitations and psychological trauma had rendered him unsuitable for continued service or routine adoption. He'd been at the shelter for 18 months, repeatedly passed over. When Michael requested to walk Albert, Emma hesitated before retrieving a specialized harness. Outside in the exercise area, they moved in perfect synchronization, the German Shepherd adjusting his pace to accommodate Michael's stiff knee while Michael moderated his stride to match Albert's careful movements. Michael signed the adoption papers 20 minutes later. When Emma asked why he wanted this particular dog, elderly, injured, with a troubled history, Michael's answer was brief. We speak the same language. By sunset, Albert sat in the passenger seat of Michael's truck, his gaze fixed on the road ahead as they drove toward the cabin. Neither looked back. The silence between them. The cabin stood nestled among pines at the end of a gravel driveway. Albert entered cautiously, conducting a methodical inspection of each room, checking corners, noting exits, establishing sight lines. Only after completing his assessment did he return to Michael's side, sitting at attention. That first night, Michael slept on the living room couch, unwilling to leave Albert alone. The German Shepherd positioned himself between the couch and the front door. When Michael woke shouting at 3:17 a.m., trapped in the recurring nightmare of the Kandahar explosion, Albert simply pressed his body against Michael's legs until the panic subsided. Their days fell into a rhythm dictated by mutual respect for each other's limitations. Morning walks along the lakeshore started short, with both moving carefully. Michael found himself checking the clock, aware that Albert needed his medication at precise intervals. During those initial weeks, Michael spoke more to Albert than he had to any human since his discharge. The words came haltingly at first. Observations about the weather, memories of childhood, fragments of military service. Albert listened with unwavering attention, his amber eyes fixed on Michael's face. The nightmares continued for both of them. On these nights, they would sit together on the porch, watching the moonlight ripple across the lake until the present reasserted itself over memory. As autumn deepened, small changes accumulated. Michael ventured into town more frequently. He began repairing the cabin, fixing sagging porch steps, replacing broken window seals. Albert's coat regained some of its former luster as his nutrition improved. One November morning, Michael constructed a series of low obstacles in the backyard. The makeshift agility course became their afternoon ritual, Albert responding to Michael's hand signals and quiet commands. They adapted the exercises to accommodate their injuries. Each small victory was celebrated without fanfare. The first time Albert completed the course without favoring his leg, the morning Michael slept through the night without nightmares, the afternoon a child approached during their walk and Albert accepted a pat on his head without tension. These moments formed the stepping stones of their gradual healing. Winter's depths. December transformed the forest into a crystalline wonderland. The lake froze solid, reflecting the pale winter sunlight. Their walk shortened but intensified, each step requiring careful navigation through snowdrifts. The isolation that had once been Michael's refuge now felt unnecessary. When the first major blizzard knocked out power across Millfield, he found himself answering the door to a county emergency worker checking on residents. The conversation marked a significant shift. Michael volunteered information about his generator and fuel supply, even inquiring about conditions elsewhere. Michael had avoided Christmas since his return. This year, however, he drove into town with Albert to select a small pine tree. The act of setting up the tree and hanging his grandfather's ornaments became a celebration of survival rather than a reminder of loss. On Christmas Eve, Michael retrieved his service medals. For the first time since his discharge, he examined them without the crushing weight of survivor's guilt. Albert sat beside him, a steady presence as Michael allowed himself to remember the good alongside the terrible, the lives saved, the missions completed, the moments of connection. January brought Arctic temperatures. Michael awoke one frigid night to find Albert shivering despite his thick coat. Without hesitation, Michael gathered extra blankets and invited Albert onto the bed, their shared body heat easing the German shepherd's discomfort. By morning, something fundamental had shifted. The remaining barriers between them had dissolved during those cold hours. They were no longer simply coexisting. They had become essential to each other's well-being. Michael expanded their world, researching therapies for canine mobility issues and joining an online forum for handlers of retired military working dogs. Through these connections, he began corresponding with other veterans struggling with similar challenges. Albert's presence in these interactions proved invaluable. During video calls with fellow veterans, he would position himself beside Michael, his calm demeanor somehow making conversation easier. By February's end, both had made measurable progress. The veterinarian noted improved muscle tone in Albert's injured leg. Dr. Levine observed changes in Michael's effect, noting his increased willingness to discuss future possibilities rather than remaining fixated on past traumas. The forest test. March brought milder temperatures and the first signs of spring. On one promising morning, Michael decided to explore a remote hiking trail through the state forest adjacent to his property. Albert moved with enthusiasm despite the muddy conditions, his injured leg showing remarkable improvement. 2 miles from the cabin, Michael spotted an old fire lookout tower partially obscured by the forest canopy. Curious, he veered off the established trail. Albert hesitated momentarily, but followed with cautious alertness. As Michael approached the structure, the earth suddenly gave way beneath him, collapsing into a concealed sinkhole. He plummeted 15 feet before impacting with the rocky bottom. Sharp pain exploded through his left leg as it twisted beneath him, the crack of breaking bone audible even through his initial shout. Albert's bark echoed from above, his face appearing at the edge of the hole. Michael attempted to sit up, but the excruciating pain forced him back. A quick assessment confirmed his fears, a compound fracture of his tibia, the bone visibly distorted beneath his torn hiking pants. Michael reached for his phone only to find it damaged from the impact. The realization of his predicament came with stark clarity. Injured, immobilized, in a remote area unlikely to see other hikers, especially midweek in early spring. Above him, Albert paced the perimeter of the sinkhole, barking continuously. The German shepherd attempted to descend the steep sides, only to retreat when the loose soil crumbled beneath his paws. Drawing on his military training, Michael forced himself to remain calm. He called up to Albert using the clear command voice that had served him through combat situations. "Albert, go home. Go get help." The dog's training conflicted with his protective instincts. He continued circling the hole, whining with increasing distress. Michael repeated the command with greater urgency. Finally, Albert stilled, his amber eyes fixed on Michael's face with evident reluctance. "Go, soldier. That's an order." With one final, low whine, Albert turned and disappeared into the forest, heading toward the cabin. Michael leaned back against the earthen wall, fighting against the waves of pain. His only hope rested with a 9-year-old injured dog somehow communicating an emergency to potential rescuers. The long return. Albert moved through the forest with single-minded determination. His injured leg protested with each step, the old damage sending spikes of pain through his aging joints. The terrain worked against him. Muddy slopes where his paws slipped, fallen logs that required careful navigation, swollen streams that forced him to seek narrow crossing points. Under ordinary circumstances, the return journey would have taken 40 minutes. Now, Albert pushed through the pain, his military training overriding his body's protests. The shepherd maintained his direction with unerring accuracy, following the invisible thread that connected him to home. 90 minutes after leaving Michael, Albert emerged onto the gravel drive leading to the cabin. His coat was matted with mud, his breathing labored, his injured leg nearly buckling beneath him. But there was no one present. The cabin stood empty, the truck absent. Without pausing to rest, Albert continued toward the paved road that led into town. The nearest neighbor lived half a mile down Lakeview Drive, a retired teacher named Margaret Sullivan. Albert reached her driveway as afternoon shadows lengthened across the landscape. His normally dignified bearing had given way to exhaustion, his movements now powered solely by determination. At Margaret's front porch, Albert summoned his remaining energy to bark, a hoarse, desperate sound that carried both urgency and fatigue. He barked continuously, circling in tight movements, then heading back toward the road before returning to repeat the pattern. Margaret appeared, confusion giving way to concern as she recognized Michael's dog in obvious distress. Understanding dawned with startling clarity. "He's in trouble, isn't he? Michael's in trouble." Albert redoubled his barking at the sound of Michael's name, moving again toward the forest path. Margaret called emergency services immediately. Within minutes, first responders were mobilizing, volunteer firefighters, EMTs, and search and rescue personnel familiar with the challenging terrain. Albert, despite his exhaustion, insisted on leading the rescuers back along the forest trail. The German shepherd navigated unerringly through gathering darkness, occasionally looking back to ensure the humans followed, his focus never wavering despite his deteriorating physical condition. As they approached the sinkhole, Albert's pace quickened, his barking taking on renewed urgency. The rescue team found Michael conscious, but showing signs of advanced shock and hypothermia. Throughout the extraction process, Albert remained at the edge of the activity, his vigilance unbroken even as his own strength faltered. Only when Michael had been stabilized and secured in the ambulance did Albert allow his guard to drop. As the vehicle prepared to depart, Michael reached through the open door, his hand finding Albert's head in a gesture of wordless gratitude. The German shepherd leaned into the touch, his mission completed, his loyalty affirmed in the most profound way possible. Heroes remembered. Michael's recovery progressed slowly but steadily. The compound fracture required surgery and extensive physical therapy, necessitating relocation to a ground-floor apartment during his initial rehabilitation. Albert accompanied him throughout this transition, providing continuity and comfort. The story of Albert's heroic rescue spread quickly through Millfield and beyond. Local newspapers featured their photograph, Michael in his wheelchair with Albert sitting alertly beside him. The headline read, "Four-legged hero, retired military dog saves former colonel." National media outlets picked up the story, drawn to its compelling elements of military service, mutual healing, and extraordinary loyalty. Michael accepted selected invitations, always with Albert by his side. They visited VA hospitals where other veterans connected instantly with the German Shepherd, recognizing in him the same qualities they valued in their human comrades: unwavering loyalty, courage under duress, and the capacity to adapt to civilian life without surrendering their essential nature. During one visit to a rehabilitation center, a young Marine who had lost both legs in Syria spent an hour sitting silently with Albert, one hand resting on the dog's scarred flank. As Michael prepared to leave, the young man spoke his first words since arriving 3 weeks earlier. He knows exactly what it costs. You can see it in his eyes. Summer brought improved mobility for Michael and a deepening connection between him and Albert. Michael began volunteering with an organization that trains service dogs for veterans, his first-hand experience providing valuable insight. A specialized veterinary practice offered pro bono geriatric care for Albert, including advanced treatments for his arthritis and muscle damage. Though his mobility improved, the calendar's advance was unmistakable in his increasingly gray muzzle and slowing gait. In October, exactly 1 year after their first meeting, Michael and Albert received formal recognition from the governor, a Civilian Service Medal for Albert and a Community Impact Award for Michael. The ceremony took place on the town green, attended by locals who had watched their story unfold. As winter returned, Michael noticed subtle changes in Albert's behavior: longer periods of rest, decreased appetite, increasing difficulty rising from his bed. The veterinarian confirmed what Michael already understood: Albert was entering the final chapter of his life. Their routine adjusted to accommodate Albert's diminishing strength. Walks shortened but became more mindful, each outing a deliberate celebration of simple pleasures. Michael read aloud during evening hours, Albert's head resting on his lap, the German Shepherd's eyes following Michael's movements with unchanged devotion. On a quiet January morning, Albert passed peacefully in his sleep. Michael buried him beneath the largest pine tree overlooking the lake, marking the spot with a stone engraved with words that encompassed their journey. Albert, soldier, savior, friend, he found me when I was lost. The grief was profound but clean, uncomplicated by the guilt that had characterized Michael's earlier losses. Albert had lived his purpose fully and had departed with dignity intact. In honoring these truths, Michael found a pathway through his sorrow. Spring returned to Lakeview Drive, bringing unexpected developments. Michael completed certification as a trauma recovery coach, specializing in work with veterans transitioning to civilian life. The cabin underwent renovations to accommodate small group sessions and weekend retreats focused on healing through nature and animal interaction. 1 year after Albert's passing, Emma called from Second Chance Animal Shelter about a German Shepherd puppy, the offspring of a military working dog whose deployment had ended prematurely due to combat zone injuries. Michael drove to the shelter that afternoon. In the last kennel, a young German Shepherd sat at attention, amber eyes assessing him with remarkable focus. As Michael crouched down, the puppy approached with cautious dignity, maintaining unwavering eye contact. The nameplate read simply, Phoenix, male German Shepherd, 4 months, seeking purpose. Michael extended his hand, palm up in greeting. The puppy placed one paw precisely upon it, not in play, but in solemn pact. Something in the gesture echoed across time, connecting past to future through the ancient bond between human and canine. Hello, Phoenix, Michael said quietly. I have some big paw prints to show you. Together they walked out of the shelter into the April sunshine. 2 beings at the beginning of a new chapter, one shaped by the lessons of loss, the other representing the promise of renewal. The healing power of rescue. In America's quieter corners, stories like Michael and Albert's unfold without cameras or headlines. Veterans return from distant battlefields carrying invisible wounds, their spirits fractured by experiences most civilians cannot fathom. Meanwhile, in overcrowded shelters across the nation, animals with their own histories of service and suffering wait behind metal gates, their value dismissed due to age or injury. What science now confirms, the heart has always known. There exists a profound healing power in the connection between broken souls. A rescue dog doesn't see disability or diagnosis, only possibility. Their unwavering presence anchors us through nightmares, panic attacks, and the isolating darkness of depression. Their needs create structure when chaos threatens to overwhelm. Their forgiveness teaches us to extend the same grace to ourselves. Every day, organizations like Pets for Vets, K9s for Warriors, and countless local rescues facilitate these life-changing partnerships. They understand that rehabilitation happens in the quiet moments. Morning walks through dew-covered fields, silent companionship during sleepless nights, the steady rhythm of breathing beside you when memories become too heavy to bear alone. We call it animal therapy, but perhaps it's simpler than that. Perhaps it's just two survivors recognizing in each other the universal language of resilience and choosing, together, to keep moving forward. Thank you for watching this heartfelt story. We hope it touched your heart and left you with something meaningful to reflect on. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, leave a comment to share your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more inspiring stories like this. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next video.